You are now listening to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Let the story begin.
One time for the lovers, two times for the ladies, three times for the brothers, four times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 One time for the lovers, two times for the ladies, three times for the brothers, four times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin. Hold me down.
Welcome to the Minority Trailblazer podcast, and I'm your host, Greg, the culture change agent. On this show, with you young, successful minorities in a variety of fields to educate, empower, and inspire our current and future generation of leaders. And it's crazy, y'all. I forgot last episode, we just passed 2 years in the making. Good God. Like, let me cue some clapping noise. All right, there you go. There you go. But, yo, I'm pumped up. I'm excited, man. And I'm most excited because, hey, first and foremost, let me get a couple shout outs, man. Shout out to Diana Riley, Yasmin Young, and Kenyatta Lee. They were the first 3 people to email me their 2018 goals. You will be receiving free tickets to the Minority Trailblazer Conference. So thank you for taking action. We had a couple more people submit after, but I said I was going to get the first 3 free admission, man. So shout out to y'all. Be expecting a call or email from me shortly. I've already kind of spoke to Diane. I'm going to follow up with her, but thank you so much for taking action. Like, I understand that we get on listen to these podcasts and, we listen, we get excited, we get motivated. But for those people that take action, I appreciate y'all. And thank you so much for so many of y'all that sending me messages like via LinkedIn, email. Like, I know one lady, and my memory jogs me, but she listened for like 18 hours with her kids driving to like Atlanta from Nebraska. I don't know the story, but, shout out to her. I can't wait to meet her at the conference. And yeah, no, I'm excited because I'm bringing back somebody who is near and dear to me, man, on this show. I'm kicking off a new series because in 4 months, March 9th and 10th, 2018, we are having the first ever Minority Trailblazer Conference in Durham, North Carolina. Tickets available at mtbconf.com. And yo, I said, bump it. For the next 4 months, everybody that's going to be speaking at our conference, we're going to have them on the podcast. And we're going to try this out this Saturday. If it don't work, we might scrap it. But for this Saturday at 10 a.m., we'll be hosting a live Q&A, first ever on the Minority Trailblazer podcast ever. Like, a lot of times our audience interaction comes via like Twitter or via email, etc. We said bump it, man. And a lot of people have questions. People want to know more about the conference, speaking, writing books, entrepreneurship, just in general. So I said, let's open it up. So this Saturday at 10 a.m., we will have our first ever Q&A. And it's going to work like this. Everybody that we have on the show, like the speakers for our conference and on this podcast, they'll be joining us. That's following Saturday on a live Q&A. It's only going to be like 30, 45 minutes, but it's going to be jam-packed and actionable. So you can find more information at gregehill.com/MT series. So I'm excited to bring him back on the show. I'm going to read a snippet of his bio. When I say a snippet, I'm talking about like a couple sentences, and then we're going to jump right into it because he was on episode, I believe like 38, 39, but so many episodes, like 40 episodes has transpired since then. And, yeah, so he is a fear expert / like motivational speaker. He don't want to call that, but he's like, I just say professional.
I'm not no motivation. Go ahead.
I just had to say it.
All right, go ahead. I'll let it go this time.
Professional speaker, man, consultant, coach, curriculum specialist. I mean, you say it, he can do it, or he's gonna be doing it the next 5 years, man. So, I call him the second coming of like, urban Tony Robbins under 30. There's like a foot shorter and,
like 3 feet. 4 feet, man. He's huge.
And I mean, the last time, it's crazy how things transpired because last time you heard him on the show, on the podcast, he just released his book, Waking Up Chase, and he was getting his feet wet in the speaking industry, still booking gigs, collegiate gigs, and doing well. but now a year later signed a campus speech, which is the top campus, college booking agency in the U.S. I mean, freaking added on another book to this whole curriculum. Been speaking all across the country over the last like 4 or 5 months. Like every time I'm trying to get in contact. He in the airport, he on stages, he having meet and greets with people. Like I just can't keep up with the man. So, and he shared a lot of gems last time, but I keep getting all these messages in my inbox about speaking, about writing books, about all this other stuff. So I said, let me bring my boy D back on this show so we can talk about speaking, his first year entrepreneurship, his biggest fears going into 2018, as well as do a live goal setting session with me and him talking about our goals going into the next year, etc. And this is going to be a sneak peek into what he's going to be bringing to the Minority Trailblazer Conference, because I don't know what session we're going to come up with it, but we're going to come up with something dynamic, man. So I don't know if I hope I didn't steal his thunder, man, but I'm excited to bring, and I'm excited too, because I remember last time I brought him on the podcast, like I put out the episode, I had like, I had like some mispronunciations in the junk. I had some live edits, cause you know, when you're your boy, you just put it out. So I said, this time we going to make sure I do my editing and he don't just get the lowest billing on the thing, man. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the fear expert himself, Darryl Bellamy, to the Minority Trailblazer podcast.
What up, G? Thanks for the invite, man. I'm happy to talk with the audience today.
Hey, no doubt, man. I mean, it's crazy that I think it's only just been like a year and a half since we last got you live on the podcast, and things have just changed so much, haven't they?
True, because a year and a half ago is when I quit my job. So I guess the first time I talked with you, I was probably just going full time. So I was speaking, but I wasn't fully out there. So now I'm a year and a half into the game, working full time for myself, speaking, writing, and doing all that stuff. So it's kind of like amazing what can happen over a year and a half.
Yeah, amazing, man. And so for our audience that may be new to this podcast or they didn't hear your interview, man, let's jump right in and share us a snippet of kind of who you are, where you're from, and how did you even get into this entrepreneurship space?
So again, Darryl Bellamy out of Charlotte, North Carolina, around 2015, working corporate America. Loved what I did, enjoyed it, about an 8 in overall satisfaction. But like the whole millennial mind, like we always need something new. We're always looking to be satisfied, looking to kind of like make that impact. So most of the books I was reading was saying a lot about anyone who was successful have either a mentor or a coach. So I couldn't find a mentor. I'm looking around like, yo, can I get a mentor? Couldn't find one. So I literally Googled life coaches in Charlotte, North Carolina. This lady popped up. She was the only one that had a real website, only one that had like testimonials. Hit her up. First time I hit her up, I was like, so how much do you cost? She was like $175 an hour. I was like, yo, you serious? So I said, what I respected about her was that I said, well, if I buy a certain amount of hours, like if I buy a few hours up front, does that price change? And she was like, nope. So I met with her, man. She introduced me to the National Speakers Association, which was a godsend as to how the business of speaking worked. And then over that year and a half, I met with her once a month, got some advice from her and started speaking, man. So right now I speak at colleges and universities, do a little bit of high school as well. I collect fears of students. So my goal is to collect as many fears as possible. I ask them like to answer the question, I fear that. I take all those, I put it into software. And my goal is just to help students be able to push through those fears, and people in general, those fears that are stopping them from getting to the next level. So I think anyone who's listening right now, we all have things that's stopping us from getting to that thing. What is that thing? And then helping you move past it so you can thrive.
Yeah, I like that. So this podcast is going to be brought into 4 sections, right? And the first section is going to be just about the speaking space in general. We're not going to dig into your first year of speaking professionally, the ups and downs. We're going to get into that next. But for the first like 10 or so minutes, let's just talk about the speaking space in general. And it's going to be a mix of beginner stuff, middle stuff, and I gotta say high level stuff. And when I say high level, I'm not talking about people that's getting 10 grand a gig. Like D might be close, but let's measure the expectations, right? So we ain't making less than $1,000, but so this is for the person that is just starting, or the person that's just in their career that is hit a little ceiling, and we just gonna just jump right in. So first and foremost, man, how many gigs did you do before you even got your first gig? First paid gig.
Before I got my first gig, I think I did probably about 3 or 4.
Okay.
And the reason why I started asking for an amount in general, G, was because I had a coach. So that coach was like, Darryl, it's okay to do stuff for free, but at some point you at least have to ask the question. And the question that I tell anyone, especially when you're starting out, the easiest question to ask when someone asks you to speak is, do you have a budget for a speaker? Right? And a lot of times they'll say, it just depends. So they'll be like, yes or no. But a lot of times I think when speakers get into the game early, and they have a message to share, they leave a lot of money on the table because they don't ask that simple question, which is, do you have a budget for a speaker? So I would say probably about 3 or 4 talks. And my first check was like $350 for a talk at my alma mater, UNC Charlotte. Shout out to the Niners out there. And then after that, my second gig, I think, was $500. And I remember texting my coach, was like, yo, is it really that easy to just ask? Get it? Because I was like, my fee was $500. He was like, okay, that's fine. Just send me a contract. And that was just a mind shift when I realized that I could get paid to not only impact people, but to get paid to do something that I love.
And let's take a step back, because I want our listeners. So when did you feel that you were called to like be a speaker, and when was it in your head that you said, yo, like, I can do this, like I'm doing it and I should be charging? Because I don't want our say a novice out there that really just, I mean, the store game, right? Because there's some things that you've already done in your life that allowed you and gave you the confidence and maybe the skill set to begin. So what would you say to that person that just beginning, that maybe their skill set is not ready yet to command money? Like, what was your mindset going into it, and when did you have the confidence to say, yo, I deserve to get paid for what I'm doing?
Yo, I think that's a good point, because sometimes I speak kind of high level, and I'm glad you're making me dig down on this. So when did I know that this is something that I really wanted to do? Was really 2010, which is like my sophomore year in college. So I was doing workshops on campus. So I was in something called the lead team. So probably at least twice or 3 times a month, I was actually giving workshops on goal setting and emotional intelligence. Where I was actually going to these campus organizations and talking all the time. And that's when students like a month later would come back, yo, Darryl, I love that workshop, or I still remember that story you told that really impacted me. So that was kind of like the seed that was planted. So I've been speaking and practicing since like 2010, and I didn't necessarily make that. And I was doing Toastmasters, and I was a charter member of the first Toastmasters Club, which for all those out there, Toastmasters is a great way. And just kind of like just get those speaking skills up and learn kind of like the art of speaking, especially when you're starting out. So I was doing this for 5 years until I got that spark to decide to be a coach and move on from there. And also, not only before that, I was doing acting and stuff in college, right? I mean, in high school. So I was doing plays. So I was always on stage and always out there. But I would say that, yeah, it's been a long journey. So it wasn't just me waking up one day, y'all want to speak and let's start charging. It's been a journey.
I got you. I just want to make it clarify, because I don't want to mislead people, and they're like, yo, they can barely put a story together, or they just trying to articulate what their proposition is, and they say they're trying to start charging, and it's like, dang, bro, I'm not getting no gigs. I'm like, dang, that podcast, that boy D did it.
So one of the stories that I tell, G, and because you've heard me speak before, is like the student body vice president story. So I ran student body vice president, lost by 19 votes in the largest election. And that's one of the ways that I introduce to students and people about failure and how you learn from it. So when I share that story now, people don't realize that was the first story I told when I was in college, talk about goal setting. So that one story is now like 7, 8, 9 years in the making. So it's as good as it is because I've been practicing that for years and years.
I love that. I also want to say too, I want to ask this because so going from 2010 to 2016, when you really started like beginning to take it seriously, what things changed about your speaking style, or was it your confidence, or there's certain small things that you adjusted in order to get to that level? Because I don't think overnight you just said boom. Like, what were some small things that you did as far as from the actual speaking skill, not like the business space? Because I want to talk about this, because I know there's people out there that's listening. They don't necessarily want to become better speakers, but they want to become better communicators at their job. Asking for raises or et cetera in their space. Because I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I see a lot of people that request just to be a better communicator. So what kind of tools and tips have you learned along the way that early on in the game helped you become like the speaker you are today?
Let's talk about the first thing that comes to mind and we can dig down deeper into this if we need to, is being able to easily accept that feedback when people are giving you feedback on your speaking. So I think a lot of times we're getting advice from people or we're speaking in different places. So that might be at work, and people might try to give you feedback and you don't want to accept it. So I would say throughout my life, I've always been one who, when people were giving me that feedback, I always try to internalize it in some way, even though sometimes it does hurt. Mm-hmm. So I would go to a Toastmasters meeting. I remember sophomore year in college, I'm thinking I'm good at speaking, and I was all right. You know, I'm in there talking, and I get around people who are really good, and they're like, Darryl, yeah, you're good, but you can work on this and that. And at that point, I probably could have took that advice and was like, no, I'm still good, and moved on. But I literally took their advice to heart and kind of improved on those little things. Even the things like the whole ums and ahs, where in Toastmasters, there's a bell that rings every time you say or ah, or those little things. So that's the first thing I thought about.
And how have you cut out the ums and the ahs?
So I still do them, as you could tell, as I just said. But really, the biggest advice that I give is just taking your time. So a lot of times when you're saying you're really just thinking about the next thing you want to say. So I just always just take a quick pause and kind of get your thoughts together, and then having people around you. So the last time I spoke, it was at NCSL. I actually had a student who every time I talked to them, they were like, and I called it out to them, and I was like, all right, so during my talk, I want you to add up as many times as I say it, right? And afterwards, they gave me my number, but during my talk, I was more cognizant of it. So a lot of times it comes down to just overall awareness. A lot of times we're not aware of it, so therefore we don't work on it. But when I was aware of it, I took the time during my talk to make sure that I'm improving on those small things. So even though I'm getting paid $1,000 to speak, I'm still working on those little nuances to be able to improve my overall communication.
I love that. So what about people that say they have a problem with nervousness? Because I'm going to give a little bit about my feedback on it. I want to see your take, because we have kind of different styles. And when I say about my thought, when somebody says, well, I'm nervous in situations where I have to speak, and not even to a large group, like speak up at a meeting, etc., I tell them two things. First, sometimes nerves appear because we're just unprepared. It's like flat out. Yes. Sometimes we're just unprepared. So when you're unprepared, it's easy to be nervous. You're like, I'm not ready for this meeting. So that's one thing I say. When you go to places, be prepared as you can about, okay, who's going to be in the audience? What are their drawbacks? Like what value can you add, etc. Boom. But then second thing, I always try to tell, this is specifically people that are speaking publicly in front of people, is take how you talk to your friends in your regular conversations and scale that up to your audience. And I mean, of course, slightly dial up the energy, but I give my audience talks like I talk to my friends. Take away some of the catty stuff. Like take away some of that. But for the most part, I mean, I try, cause I mean, when you're talking to your friends, you're natural, you're organic. Some of you are funny. Like I know people in real life are hilarious, and I've seen them at certain meetings and just horrible. I'm like, bro, like you can't communicate at all. Like, is that really what
they code switch? They're probably code switching, right?
Yeah. So I said, like, when you go into that meeting, like always think about how can I relay this message in an authentic way with myself. So what would you give some feedback to some people that say, hey, D, I'm not even trying to be a professional speaker, but I just want to be able to speak up in meetings. I want to be able to lead some discussions in classroom, or just be able to ask questions in class or ask questions on my job. Like, what would you tell them?
So let me start by saying that hands down. So 2 weeks ago, I was at a high school and I spoke to a group of 30. That same group of 30, right? I felt the same nervousness when I spoke to 2,000, a month before that. So the nervousness is always going to be there. And I try to use that to fuel me instead of to hold me back. And that sounds so cliche. I use it to fuel you, but that nervousness is always there. I'm going to agree with you when you said a lot of times it comes down to if you're unprepared. Mm-hmm. So in the past, if I've just like popped up and was like, I'm just going to come and speak, then that nervousness is there. When I find myself preparing and knowing exactly like my flow and what I'm going to say, then that helps with the nervousness. I wouldn't agree with you on that. The second thing is tell stories, right? So a lot of my talks, it's my personal stories that I'm giving. So at the end of the day, if I mess up or if I change, no one really knows, because at the end of the day, it's my story that I'm telling. And we all know when we're around our friends, you're telling stories and it's just interesting. So a lot of times people try to get on stage and they try to be somebody who they're not, or to match the audience. When I get on stage, I'm me, right? When you get on stage, you're you. You don't care if you got to say, yo, I don't care if I got to if I got to laugh or joke or say whatever I have to do, but I'm being me. One thing that helps my nervousness is before I get on any stage, I repeat to myself or I say to myself, it's not about you. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when we are nervous, we're thinking about ourselves and not thinking about the message that we're going to give the audience. And even when it comes to your overall, let's just talk about people who are in corporate America and working, that nervousness is always going to be there as well. Something that I share is the whole 5-second rule, which I feel like it's a new book that came out. Well, it's a new rule that I now teach in my keynotes and when I'm talking to people in general is our brain talks ourselves out of something usually within 5 seconds. So usually when people don't want to speak up, I count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the 5-second rule states that within 5 seconds, you have to make some sort of action forward or some movement forward. So use that action to be able to push through that fear.
I love that. And while you were talking, I was thinking about one thing that it jumped out to me as well. It's just the difference when, like you said, when you're telling a personal story, but also two things. Realize, like, making sure you have a purpose. So when you're talking, like the purpose. But then the second thing, and I was like, wow, it blew me away when mine changed, is everybody doesn't receive information the same way. And a lot of times when you're speaking in front of an audience, you're looking for people that are like nodding their heads. And I mean,
you're looking for that one, that one head nod that you need it.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, it's easier. People like, I hate when people, they don't look at the audience. Like, look at the audience, not because first it allows you in your mind to mentally say that it's really just a conversation. That's all you're having is a conversation. So you look at people in my eyes, it's kind of like I'm talking to you. So it's like, okay, cool. It's a little bit easier, but also too, that allows me the comfortability to kind of be myself, because nobody, when you're talking to your people, you're not just looking at anything. You're looking at people in the eye, looking at faces, looking at emotions. So that allows that. But two, when I was younger in the game, when I was talking to students and the student was dozing off, or when I was at like a bigger gig in college student and somebody wasn't listening, a lot of times I used to be like, yeah, man. But I realized, A, your message is not always going to please everybody. But then two, everybody doesn't receive information like shaking their heads. Like, yep. Like there was a time I gave a presentation, and there was a kid that I promise you he was sleeping. I promise you straight up he was dead asleep. And I'm like, yo, I yell when I talk sometimes. I'm like, how you gonna sleep through that? So I get a call the next week, and they were like, so the dude, and I tell my story about hustling sodas and whatnot. He ended up started selling sodas and etc. and modeled everything that I talked about. And just because he didn't receive the message which I thought he should receive, or the norm, then I thought I didn't do it necessarily a job. So like I said, I think you hit it on the head. Once I took my ego out of it and just saying, I prepared, I gave my message, I did the best that I could, everything changed. And now, I mean, I am still self-aware. When I see somebody yawning, I'm like, okay, I need to rev it up or something. But for the most part, I'm I don't care what you think. If I prepared for it and I did my thing, I mean, of course I'm going to take feedback, but I left it all on the court.
And let me add some of that, Greg, because I know we're all about like actionable things that people can use. So I always get there early before I speak somewhere, and I always want to meet people on the front row or those front tables. So I'm always like, hey, what's up? You in the front row? I need that energy. I need those head nods. So actually, I'm friends with the person on the front row before I even start. So if I don't got anybody in the audience, I know I got that front row.
Yeah.
So,
and also too, let's get a little, before we move to the first year recap, I want to hit on some, how do you prepare differently from a audience of, say, like you said, 2,000 people and then a small group? Do you change your preparation? Like, what are some things you do beforehand that most people don't realize that you learned over the last year or so dealing with different audiences, different times of the day? Let's get into the nitty gritty of this.
So for a smaller audience, I feel like it's the same preparation, because it's a lot of times it's still that same message that I'm trying to convey. But for a smaller audience, you can have more conversation. You can have more people stand up and share their stories and go a little bit deeper. But with the audience of like 2,000, there's no way you can have everyone share an individual story, because you'll be there for like 3 hours. When it comes to those smaller audiences, I'm able to walk around and actually touch people, right? And have those those one-on-one eye contact. But if you're in an auditorium with 2,000, it's really all you. So for me, I always get a little bit more nervous when I'm on a stage in front of when I'm in front of a group that big, because I can't really get to know the audience as well as I usually can with a smaller audience, with a smaller group. But how's my preparation different? I thought my preparation is the same depending on it doesn't depend on the audience. I think it's the same, G.
I got you.
Would you say yours is different?
Yeah, mine's a little different because I realized and this is just maybe specific to me, but in larger audiences, jokes carry a lot easier. Like, I guess it's a social thing where it's like, I say stuff that I don't even think is halfway funny and people are like dying laughing. And I had to realize too, how to really pause and accept applause, accept like feedback, because if you don't, like my first times I spoke at a place with 1,000, like I was killing it. But when people were laughing, I was trying to talk over him. I didn't know when to wait. I didn't know when to start to clap. Like I was cutting off everything. And I said, gee, you got to, like, when larger audiences, you just got to be a little bit more patient with timing, because when the wave starts, you can't just jump and say, okay, I'm gonna hit this point. Like you got to let stuff die down or let stuff sit. And I realized I took the next level when I just started embracing that pause. Not just like killing, doing a fire hose, like nah. But like you said, in smaller audiences, I changed it around a little bit because I have to intentionally plan on different, like, raise your hand if you want to do this, or getting different stories, because I know you had a lot of experiences doing workshops, etc. Majority of my stuff was just me speaking. So I have to like plan, okay, what questions am I going to ask people to start engaging? Like, how can I create an environment that's engaging? But when I'm just have an audience where, and plus two, let's talk about, it depends on if I have an hour to 15 minutes. Like an hour is easy for me.
Yeah.
15 minutes, you got to be precise. You may not have no
the jokes got to be right. Yeah. Everything got to hit. Before
we go to the first year, I do want to ask this one thing, because we talked about it privately last week, and talk about your no-hitter performance, because I know with your fear talk, you adjust it frequently, but a lot of the core staples of it stay the same. And I know you talked about last week or so, you felt that you had a phenomenal just time delivering it. And I want you to talk to your audience, like how long it took to perfect it and what made it, in your eyes, one of your best performances yet.
So, like I said, it takes it took 2.5 years, to get it to where it is now. Just failing, like we say, like you try things out, you're like, oh, that joke won't work, or I can tell that story at some point.
You might as well tell it. Hey, you want to? You can. Nah, I don't know. It's up to you, bro. I ain't gonna force you to tell that one.
I'll tell it real quick. So I'm speaking to a group of students, and so usually when I tell my story about how I lost, and I lost by 19 votes, I tell a joke about, now I know how Hillary Clinton felt when she lost. So I'm telling that story, and I tell that joke, and I will say that it's a predominantly like white audience, right? And I tell that joke, and no one laughs. So I then decide to take it one step further, and I say, fearless, Lord Jesus, and I say, and now I really, and I know how Donald Trump would have felt if it wasn't for Russia. And the whole audience just like went, first of all, they were silent for the first joke. So the second one, they were like just looking at me. And I literally just like kept it moving, like went to the next point. But it was one of those times where you like, I will do that joke anymore. But that's what the reps are about. And we talk about like getting out there to high schools when people are trying to start, and getting out there to these community organizations, because you don't know at the end of the day what's going to work until you get out there and try. And there's a lot of people who want to be speakers, but yet they're in their room talking to themselves, right? And that's not how you're going to learn and how you're going to grow. So I had a talk, last week, and it was at a high school with like 30 students. I got there. Sometimes you get a vibe and you're like, this is going to be an amazing experience. And sometimes you get there and you're like, I don't think this is going to work today. And that was one of those audiences where I was like, this is not going to work. And literally it went amazing. Cause I was able to talk to them one-on-one. They were sharing stories. I was able to engage some of my young Black brothers who were not interested when I first started. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's something that as a speaker, you have to be used to and be able to handle that in a moment. But was able to engage them by like 25 minutes in, they were fully engaged, fully answering questions, and felt like I was able to actually make a real impact, which you don't feel every time. And we talked about this as well. So people think you get up on those stages and you always leave like, I killed it. You know, this was one of my best talks ever. But no, sometimes you leave and you're like, did I actually make an impact? And a few weeks later, you might get a letter from a student or email that shows it made a difference. But not every talk is one of those you leave on level 10 type of experiences. So that's something I'm used to as well.
Shoot, my first 2 years, every talk, I would smile, but I immediately go to my iPhone and start typing in, okay, here's what you need to make. Here's the adjustment you need to make. Boom, boom, boom. Like I'm still uber critical, but 2 years ago, every single time I hit the stage, I got off like, dang, man, I could have done better. I left a lot on the table, and that's normal. That's okay. And it doesn't change when you start making money doing it.
Yeah. And it's okay as long as we're taking something from it and you learn. Like I've seen people who get on stage and they probably always feel that way, but yet they're bringing in the checks. So therefore they're not really altering it, but the goal is to constantly get better and keep on improving. So yeah, you gotta take that feedback.
And I don't think I've ever asked you this question, but I think I kind of know where it's going, but I do want you to speak about briefly, because majority of your gigs does not primarily for a minority audience. Like I've looked at a lot of your pictures, and we just talked. The schools you go to is not primarily 99% minority. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are speaking or at jobs that is not all black people. And I know people don't want to get into the speaking industry, want to get paid doing it, but every time you get booked, it's not just going to be around black and brown Latino people. So was it a necessary adjustment, or I don't think you really had to just like tell us about your experiences dealing with audiences that do not have the same background as you, or just quite frankly, the skin complexion.
So I had a interesting upbringing. So if we think about it, high school, I went to a high school in Raleigh, Southeast Raleigh. At that point, I think the school was like 80% black. So I had that going up in the high school. Now I went to a PW in college. So going to a PWI, when I talk about those workshops that I did, who are those workshops in front of? A predominantly white audience. So, and then after that, I worked for a training company and I had the same audience in front of me. So I would say I've learned to, actually, I don't even think I had to adjust. You're right. Because going back to what we said earlier, you just have to be you. And you call me what? Explosive vanilla? You say I'm a very vanilla. I stick to the rules. Like I'm pretty, I don't usually go out like we're talking about the whole Trump joke. Like that's usually not me. I was just real fearless that day. But I don't think I had to shift that much. And honestly, when I've done, I've done some, have I done predominantly? I'm trying to see I've done an audience where there's a lot of, I would say a lot of us in the audience, but I don't have to switch it up that much because at the end of the day, the only person I can be is me. Mm-hmm. And usually me works. So did I answer your question?
No, I think that's perfect. I think you hit on something perfect because at the end of the day, black audience, white audience, etc., all you can do is you, because there's no one style of speaking. You know the industry as well. Like there's ETs, there's Darryl Bellamy's, there's Greg Hill's, then there's Brandwood Drew, there's Seth Godin's, there's Tony Robbins, there's Brandon Bouchard's, there's Inky Johnson's. There's so many different styles, but what you see is the people that usually go to the top and stay at the top are people that just themselves.
People got to stop copying off of people's styles as well, right? So I just see on like YouTube and Instagram, a lot of these people popping up with these videos, and honestly, they sound just like ET, right? Mm-hmm. The world doesn't need another ET, to be honest, right? And you're not going to be that person. So try your best, and I know it's kind of hard, but try your best to figure out what is your style and go with that, because there's people who will hire ET because they want to hear ET, and there's people who are going to hire Greg E. Hill because they want to hear you, and there's people who connect with ET who won't connect with you. So just be yourself and stop copying, man. Just follow your path.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing on that note. I've been thinking about it all the time, and this is a freebie. This is something that I think we give a lot of information that coaches would pay a lot of money for. But I will say this, and I think Darryl is a testament, and I know so many other people are testaments, but I know there's a lot of information out there about growing your brand on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, your social media followers, etc. And I'm not saying you should not. You should have a plan. You should be on those, actively engaging those mediums. But if you believe that consistency in those mediums are going to take you to the highest level, professionally paid speaking, etc., it may. But 9 times out of 10, you have to be an outlier. And then 2, it may take you 5 to 10 years to get your first paid gig rather than networking, etc. So I know we don't have all time to talk about this, but D, I think you are an exemplar of a guy that utilizes conferences, utilizing network situations, and just adds value that people he comes in contact with, and has been able to grow in the industry, because you know people that's really doing it and been killing it for a long time in the industry with no social media at all. So what advice would you give out there to a guy or a young woman or a young man out there that has engaging personality but is putting all their time on developing a brand on social media?
I can't remember once where a client called me and said, "Hey, Darryl, I found you through Instagram and I want you to come and speak at our conference." Not once. Now, I have had clients who said, "Hey, Darryl, we have a referral. Hey, Darryl, we saw you at this conference and we looked at your Instagram and it looked kind of cool." Or after we found you, we looked at your YouTube and kind of saw how you speak. So at this point, I think my last post on Instagram was maybe about a month or so ago. And it's not because I don't want to post, it's just that that's not a revenue generating model, it's Instagram. So getting out there, those conferences, where I lost my train of thought real quick, but going to those events where people are hiring for what you want to speak about. So I hit up the APCAs, the NACAs, the National Teachers Association, whatever those conferences where everybody that you want to speak in front of, all those people who are hiring are going to be there at once. But when it comes to YouTube and social media, that can add a lot to it. And people with Drew brand with Drew might say, "Yo, I get a lot of my engagements." Mm-hmm. So it all depends on who you are and what you're doing. But for me personally, I've never had a client call and say, "Hey, Darryl, we found you on Instagram." So that's not where I put my time most of the time.
Nah, I got it. And there's one book I want to recommend before we go talk about, and this is, so I guess for my non-speakers, y'all can come back in to the huddle real quick. We can talk about business and all this other stuff. But there's one book I want to recommend. It's called Confessions of a Public Speaker by Scott Birkin. It is a very, descriptive, honest, direct book about a public speaker, about just the game and what it really is. And I would recommend that to anybody that's coming to the game to read it. And it shows just, it's a very, very candid and very authentic book. Matter of fact, I need to write one for myself about this whole speaking thing, etc. But it's a phenomenal book. Once again, it's Confessions of a Public Speaker by Scott Birkin. Before we switch into the next subject, which is a first year recap, where I'm just going to not pick your brain. I hate that, but I'm just going to take a deep dive into D, do some soul searching about what is lessons learned in first year. I want to take us to our sponsor, which is Culture Change United, which is a sponsor of the Minority Trailblazer Conference, which is coming March 9th and 10th, 2018 at the Durham Convention Center. Majority of the guests that are going to be there presenting have been on the podcast, and most of them are top 10 podcast downloads, like freaking Moyo Akome, freaking Darryl Bellamy, Brand with Drew. So many others are going to be in attendance, man. I'm telling you, it's going to be a life-changing, soul-changing, career-changing, all that changing conference. So make sure you secure your tickets today at mtbconf.com. And, for more information, you can contact us on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., all that good stuff. So, D, back into it, man. We are approaching a year and a half into the game, man. What word would you describe how this year and a half, depending on yourself, has been?
Yeah, one word?
Yeah, just one word. Just start off.
I'm going to say journey.
Why journey?
So this is how I look at my career in general. So I wanted, mentally, we all wanted to go fast, right? We all want things to happen fast. We want the impact, the money, whatever that is for you. But over the past few years, I've been repeating to myself that this is a journey and it takes 5-10 years to eventually get to where you are. So I look at every year as another stepping stone in that journey. And I feel like this year, I took another step.
So what was the big step you took, and then how did you go about, like, in your eyes? Because I mean, we don't have the plan and we don't really know behind the scenes what transpires, but what do you think are some of the big instruments and two, some of the habits that you developed that allowed you to make that step this year?
Okay, so one of the biggest things that happened to me this year was being able to get picked up by an agency. So that was something that literally 2 years in a row, I tried to apply, got turned down. And then literally this year was the first time that I actually got in the agency. So that was a huge step for me, because that was always something that I kind of wanted mentally. And then when I actually got the offer, I'm like, do I really want to do it? So it's interesting how your mindset shifts. But for me, that was a big step, which gave me more opportunities naturally to be able to speak and to be able to hone in on that craft. You asked the second question as well, G. I forgot what you said.
And what would you say, because I know the results are starting to come, but what habits would you say that have allowed you to take advantage of these opportunities? Because there's a lot of us, I ain't gonna lie, I've said it before on many podcasts, opportunities are all around us every single day. But very, very, very few of us are really prepared to not only take the opportunity, but dominate and kill the opportunity. So what habits do you say this year that are different from the past that have allowed you to kind of take that step?
The biggest thing, and I think this goes to whether you want to be a speaker, whether you're in the professional field or whatever it is, and it sounds so cliche. I hate these things that, first of all, I think that there's tenets of life and success that don't change. Yeah. And sometimes we hear it over and over again, but that still doesn't take away that it's still an important tenet. Mm-hmm. And that tenet is like connecting with other people who are similar to you and are trying to do great things. And the second thing is finding mentors and stuff. So one thing that has helped me a lot is finding those coaches and those mentors. So I had one coach that was for a year and a half. And then I found another speaker who was doing like 60 something gigs a year. Said, I want to hire you for 2 to 3 months. That $600 I paid for those 2 months got me $6,500 because they told me to do one thing that produced that income. Then after that, I hired someone else, and now I have a coach that helps me, who's actually from my agency, who kind of helps. But the one thing that has helped me over and over again is find those people who are dominating and reaching out, and not only reaching out to get information, but reach out to offer value. A lot of times people reach out to pick your brain or to pick, that's easy to say no to, right? But if you're reaching out to be able to help that person or to be able to add to what they're doing, so figure out what skills. So I always try to figure out what skills I can help that person with and maybe offer that to be able to get in with them. But I would say mentors, man, and connecting with like-minded individuals. So I have conversations, every week or throughout the day with people who really, really motivate me. So I have a friend who this week wound up getting a grant for her technology company. And getting that text message at like 10 o'clock on, let's say, Wednesday, fueled me all week to be able to say what was possible for my business, just for people like me who are doing amazing things.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's self-explanatory, man. And what do you think has been the top struggle your first year in this whole entrepreneurship game?
Actually getting stuff done, right? So staying focused. So when you're an entrepreneur and you have actually 24 hours in a day, but let's say 8 to 5 or even more than that, it's easy especially if you're at home and turn on the TV, right? And get distracted, or my mom might call sometimes, or friends might call during their break. It's easy to get distracted. So my biggest struggle this year was just overall staying to a fixed schedule and making sure that I was actually getting stuff done. Because this year, when I look back at it, yes, I did well, but I could have doubled production and probably could have did a lot better if I controlled my time during the day. So I know with you, G, you're like, 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 are grind hours. So you're not really accepting text messages. You're not expecting calls. You need to call me. You need to call me after that. And I think going into 2018, I need to put better structures into place to make sure that I'm protecting my time to be able to level up even more.
What were some of the things you would tell to somebody out there that is this and in their first couple years of entrepreneurship, or that are in corporate right now, just in life, and just trying to take the next level, going into 2018, man, as far as attacking their fears and because a lot of us right now, let's be honest, even myself and you as well, there's so many others, there's so many things that we know we could be doing where we're putting off until A, we're ready, till B, we get the financing, or C, we get the team. And some of us, like every year, we may say we put off for the stuff. We may take one thing away from that and then grow that. But then some of us are putting this stuff off and off and off. And you look at it, it's been 3 years you've been putting off losing weight. You've been putting off getting another job. You've been putting off really focusing it in on your business. So what would you say to those people that, because it's natural as humans just to put stuff off, but to get into that lane of, let me just do that now. Let me have some urgency about stuff.
Let's start here. So taking small steps. Mm-hmm. So those small steps add up. So let's say when I first started speaking, I didn't start speaking necessarily at high schools and stuff. I started with YouTube videos every week. Mm-hmm. And those YouTube videos sometimes gave me the confidence to be able to actually get out there in front of an audience. So I started small, and then over time I started charging $1,000, and then it started going up, and I was able to actually move out of that corporate job. So you have to start somewhere. So my passion has really always been like helping students. So when I got out of college, I didn't take a job. I tried to start this business called College Concierge. I needed 100 parents to sign up, y'all. I got one parent to sign up, so it was an utter failure. But let's say that I was scared, I was nervous, and I decided, you know what? This business is something I want to start at some point. 3 years later, when I should have been doing Bellamy Inspires, which is my company now, I could have started College Concierge, and it would have failed 3 years later. But yet I started it early, right? And learned that that wasn't the path for me. One of my biggest fears for people listening or for people in general is that they find out 5 years too late that the business that they had now, right, is not a good idea. So if you started now, then you can realize and pivot that maybe College Concierge wasn't the thing for me, but I can still help students, and I'm doing that through speaking. So take those small steps so you can figure out if it works now, so 5 or 10 years don't pass by. You try to start that company, and you're like, this is not what I should have been doing, and you found out, and you could have found that out 10 years ago. So get it done now. The second thing is when you think about leaving that position, and if you think about entrepreneurship, a lot of times these risks that it looks like we're taking, they look like big risks, but all of our risks are calculated. Like all my risks are smart. So I left a job making $70K, right? And decided that I was going to quit and start speaking. But what people don't know is that I saved up $20,000 to $25,000 before I quit. So I had that $20,000. So it was a risk to quit, but I always knew that if that $25,000 ran out, there was always Uber. there was always a job that I could go back to because people still couldn't take my degree away from me, and they couldn't take those skills that I've learned. So it was a risk, but it wasn't really that big of a risk because I set myself up. Now, there were times during that first year I was like, ooh, that amount was getting kind of low. I have to go Uber, but money always came in to be able to support me, and now I'm doing well. But risks, when people act like they're taking these huge risks, they are sometimes, but a lot of times they're setting themselves up for success by taking those steps to shield their risks. And last but not least, dots always connect. So a lot of times we don't know why we're going through different things, and we don't know why we're at that corporate job. But looking back, you'll always know. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So don't be happy where you are necessarily, but realize that you're there for a purpose, because a lot of the information that I learned in my corporate job, I was in consulting and banking or whatever, but project management, those 2.5 years that I was kind of happy but really wasn't satisfied, I used those skills every single day in my business to be able to move forward.
I can't add anything to that, man. So I appreciate that. So let's transition into 2018, man. Our last one of our getting close to the end. 2018. What would you say is your biggest fear going into 2018, and how do you plan on tackling it? And we'll both answer this. If you want me to go first, I can.
Yeah, go first, and I'll think about it.
All right. So I guess my biggest fear in 2018 is, this conference, and not more so the actual, just doing it the right way. Like doing it the right way where I know we'll get it done, and it better get done. I'm already paid for the venue and all this other stuff, but just not doing it the haphazard way of, okay, we just making just by the skin of our teeth getting it done. I understand. I mean, that's the nature of business sometimes. I've been doing that last couple of years with the whole tour. We were able to do 9 states and 9 cities with no money start up, outside of a couple loans, but I really want to do this the right way because I really feel it has potential to really build something great. But I mean, it's December now and we're in the trenches, and I ain't gonna lie, there's a lot of fear and anxiety about really getting fully behind it because you just don't know what, like, the dots will always connect, but there's always fear and trepidation. Okay, gee, what if you put it out there and it's like, oh, first couple weeks, nobody buys nothing. So are you going to, like, what if it's February and you only got like 50 tickets sold? It's like, what happens after that? And then the sponsorship. Okay, when you're reaching out to sponsor, how should you reach out to them? How do you really convey that you really can guarantee this amount? Are people that listen, you have, a couple 100,000 downloads, are they really going to show up? And how can you reach this audience, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all these fears. And I'll be honest, I mean, sometimes I do get a little bit overwhelmed, like, yo, specifically now it's a one person team and I'm adding on people. So I just added over the last week or so, like 4 or 5 people to help out, and I'm going to bring on a consultant. But it is a big fear, because going into it, I'm just now getting used to, and I guess the bigger overarching fear is the fear of increased responsibility. Because over the last 2 months, I mean, we've gotten some gigs and got some contracts that really have changed my business for the better. But it also creates a huge risk going into 2018. Okay, now that we do have increases, how am I going to be able to manage my money effectively? Am I going to be able to really build a team and trust the team to get stuff done? Should I really put my resources in hiring an event manager that may cost me a lot up front that I really don't want to give? But is that going to be the best fit to make sure everything gets done? And really having to make these decisions, because now when you get to the big leagues, you got to start making big league decisions. And I think that is something that is weighing on my mind. And I guess to answer the question completely, how do I plan on doing it? I plan on talking myself into it. And I was listening to a sermon by Stephen Furtick, and it said, and I think you mentioned it earlier in our podcast, our mind quickly dismisses stuff, quickly tells us what we can't do, quickly tells us, no, you can't get a team, or no, you can't get any sponsorships, or nobody is going to sign up, or blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times we don't talk ourselves into certain things and lean into it instead of lean away. Cause like at the end of the day, what if I do go all in behind them? If it does feel, okay, I learned something. Hey, I don't need to do no conference no more. It's going to stay in the podcast. Like, hey, yeah, I didn't really lose anything. Like outside the money I invested, hey, it's okay. And I think sometimes I have to tell myself it is okay, but lean all the way in. Don't half lean. Don't just put a couple posts out there, see what's resonating. No, F it. You gonna do the series? Do the series. You gonna go all in with this? Go all in with the promo. Give everything you got. So if it does not go to where you goes playing, you cannot hide behind something, say, oh, well, I didn't do this, or so-and-so didn't support me. No. Just rev it all in. And I think so many of us right now, we're not going all in because we want to out. We want to out like, oh, Darryl ain't support me, or this company didn't give me no sponsorship, or my listeners didn't come through. Instead of saying, yo, let me see how I can go in. Because I mean, so many times in my life, I didn't go all out. I was one of them guys that was too cool. The reason why I didn't get the girls I really wanted in high school, or even sometimes a grown adult, I was scared of rejection, so I wasn't even gonna ask. So then I could be like, well, shoot, man, she ain't see, whatever. No. Won't nobody hating on you, bro. You just didn't even ask the question, bro. You too cool. So
you don't get what you don't ask for.
Yep. So I'm working right now. Every day I tell myself, and I ain't perfect on it, but take away the ego. Take away the ego. Cause that's what's really stopping you. Cause you don't want to put something out there and people like are not really that excited. Nobody's like, yo, I'm all in. You don't want to put a post out there and then 6 people come to this webinar. You don't want to put a post out there and then maybe one person buy a sweatshirt when you know you should be promoting your products, but you ain't promoting them because you just said, I don't know what the feeling's going to be out there. Take the ego out of it and put it out.
So you said so many great things. I don't even know where to start. First thing, when it comes to fear, I think a lot of times we have to manage our relationship with it. So you're doing some big things, right? So that's scary. And anytime I'm doing something that's pushing me outside of my comfort zone, I try not to call it fear. I try to call it excitement, because that's really what life is about, right? It's about constantly pushing ourselves to do more. And honestly, if you're not afraid to do it, then you're not really living, right? So if everything you do is not pushing you out your comfort zone and you're not scared about anything, you're really not pushing yourself, and you're really not living an exciting life. You might as well just not be living. Okay, I didn't mean to say that. But yeah. I mean, you gotta, because no, don't take it out. Leave it. You might as well be pushing yourself. So I'm always looking for ways to push myself to, I guess, make myself feel that way, and I call it excitement. So I'm like, that's really exciting to me. Now, when you ask that question, like what my fear is, I pulled up my goals for like next year, and I kind of had an epiphany because I realized that nothing is really scaring me about next year, and that's a problem, right? Because all of my goals, like I have some big goals, like I probably will apply for a PhD program next year, like to Ivy League, and that's huge. And there's other things that I'm doing, but I'm looking at this list, and there's nothing that I'm really nervous about. And I said to myself when you were speaking, like, I need to challenge myself more, right? Like, I need to be something on this list needs to be like, Darryl, like, if you don't do this, like, it's over, or it scares the hell out of you. So you really put something into my mind. So I know it's something that I always want to do a student conference. I think that might scare me, but if I look at this list right now, that's like at the bottom of the list, meaning it's not a priority. So you inspired me today is to make sure that, yes, I have some great big things on this that I want to accomplish this year, but I need to make sure that I have something on that list that scares the heck out of me, to make sure that I'm constantly pushing myself as well.
Yeah, man. I never thought about it like that. But now you just saying that's the point, just having this open dialogue. And I'm even, side note, I challenge myself with our friends, with most of my friends, specifically my close friends, that have more open dialogue about fear, about different challenges, etc. Because I realize, and I didn't really have this, I haven't had this problem in the last couple of years, but I see it so much in society where a lot of times our closest friends, we're not having dedicated dialogue about life. We have dedicated dialogue maybe about relationships, about just shooting the issue, about what's going on, homecoming, etc. But about fears, about
vulnerability, being vulnerable.
Yeah, and it's like and that's why so many of us are kind of broken, are kind of fearing. That's why it's so powerful when you do collect fears and you read these fears and please can you share with us some of the fears you've collected over years that really left a big impact on you that you remember to this day, that kind of like sometimes you may look back and like, yo, I'm not encouraged to get up today. I don't really want to do this. And you look back and all these fears collected. Is there any that stand out?
The one thing that stands out in general is that I get home and I read. So at this point I've collected around 5,500 or so. And the only time I really get like emotional is when I'm reading those. So I might be on the plane coming home or by my bed just reading them. And one thing that stands out to me is that I'm reading the same things over and over and over again. So when I'm sitting there reading it, I'm like, I wish I could go back. And now I tell students at the end of the day that at the end of the day, you're not alone. Everyone is feeling the exact same thing. It's just those people who are successful, those people who move forward and are able to do big things, realize that they're not alone and they actually do something about it. So the number one fear category, right? We put in the software, we know that is the fear of failure. And I think we've hit that a few times when you talk about the conference, like what if it fails? And it doesn't matter if you're Elon Musk about to create the first electric car with the battery, or Bezos back in the day when he did Amazon, or even some people in your community who are doing amazing things. I think we need to look at other people besides these huge figures in American society. But they all feel that and they realize that other people feel it, but yet they do something about it. And that's what I challenge myself about all the time. I mean, even if I post a video of me speaking, I still feel nervous about that. Like, yo, what will people think, right? Or is this good enough? Or 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. speaking to a group of students, and some of my colleagues who have never heard me speak before came in the room. And I get nervous then, like, yo, because the worst thing I want is people to see me online, yo, Darryl is good. Darryl kills it. And they get in the room and be like, yo, this dude sucks. He's trash. So I still feel that, but I realize that, yo, at the end of the day, everyone is feeling the fear of failure and not making and letting it hold them back in certain areas of their life. The second thing is judgment and rejection. Yo, we care too much what other people think, right? Like, and it's hard because sometimes it's your family and it's your friends and people around you. But getting past that judgment and that rejection is one of those things that helps a lot. A quote, I don't know how we're doing on time, but a quote that I remember, or a story was that on the day that you're buried, right? Like funeral, they said that if it rains on that day, the amount of people who go to your burial site from your funeral decreases by 1/3 if it rained that day. And I wondered, like, how many of us on a daily basis are listening to those opinions and not doing things based on those people who wouldn't even come to your burial site because it rained that day.
Oh, my God. Woo!
And a lot of times we're listening to those opinions of people who don't really rock with us, aren't really for us. And there's a lot of people who might be around you, and I don't think there's that many people around me, but there might be, right? People who might act like they're totally for you and they're giving you ideas, but maybe they're not really for you. So I make sure that I keep my circle small, and the advice from my siblings and my close friends I listen to. But all that other advice, I let it go. And I don't necessarily care. Like, I care what my close friends and family think. And everyone else, kick rocks.
Man, that's powerful. It's like, why that really hit home. There's a lot of stuff that we do in general for people that are not even gonna be at our weddings, and are dang sure not gonna be at our no dang funeral. Like, people that they might not even like the post that the RIPD post.
Yeah.
They might like it's just they glossing right over it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or like Greg, you have people in your life who will want to give advice, or you might not want to move forward because of their judgment, right? But yet you release a book and they don't buy it, right? People who might be close to you who might not make those moves. So for me, I look at actions more than anything. Who are those people who are supporting you throughout that journey? And I listen to those opinions more than the people on Instagram who might scroll by and not like, even though they did like it, right?
Yeah.
So it's powerful.
And I think and as we begin to close, I got one more thing I want to touch on, then we wrap it up. I think it's really critical out there and I had to challenge, and I'm gonna lie, I challenged myself this week to do it. I think D has been doing a phenomenal job of it as well. But for those of you out there, and I don't care if you have a business, I don't care if it's just life or general, that are looking for support, right? First, give support. And it does not mean that it has to be $100 or something, whatever. Like, it meant the most to me that I had like a donation link on one of my live events, and my boy Nate donated like $3 to the event. And it meant a lot, not because it was $3, but it was just like he wanted for some way to help out. It wasn't say, I won't go get my whole ticket, but it's like, yo, I'm going to find some way. And it didn't have to be money, but that $3 sign, that's my boy for life. If he called me right now and said, G, I need 100, I had 100 bank, I give it to him right now, because that's real. Like, I didn't ask him for it, and we weren't even that close, but now I do anything for it. So and the reason why I say that is because I was thinking about myself. Some days I do get in, and I don't get into it as much as I used to, but I'm like, man, so am I not getting the support, whatever. And then I have to take evaluation. Like, what support am I giving? Outside of quotes, outside of just being myself, like, that's cool, but what support am I giving? Have I just randomly gave my time to somebody? Have I randomly volunteered? And a lot of us right now, if you took an honest inventory, and this is going to be real for our listeners, the people that's saying, oh, I'm not getting the support in my business, I'm not getting my support in this, ask yourself how much support you have given.
I have multiple stories. I talked to one of the top speakers in the game before. Mm-hmm. He talked for me on the phone. He answered the phone on vacation, right? Somebody gave me his number. One of my coaches gave me his number to call him. He talked to me for 11 minutes, G. I got off the phone with him. I sent him a PayPal amount for $11 and said, that's what I can give you right now. I appreciate the 11 minutes that you gave me, $1 for every minute, right? Mm-hmm. I had another mentor who gave me some of his time. I went and brought his book and left him an Amazon review. My mentor right now, I went over his house. He gave me so much game. I was telling him about this book that I love. He said, yo, I need to get that. I went home. I shipped the book to his house. So it's those little things that we have to be able to show appreciation and show gratitude. And like you said, it's $11. It's a $12 book. Like, it's buying his book and doing something. But it's those things that add up, where when you call those people, they know that you value their time and value their information. So they're going to be more willing to give you that time.
Yep. And I guess our last thing as we close, man, and I think we already talked about it, so we're not going to spend too long on this, is if you could just share with our audience, man, just a couple of your goals. And I know you don't got to give us all the tea, but just a little bit of your goals heading into 2018.
So my biggest thing that I'm trying to do, and it might switch after we had our conversation about me pushing myself even more, is processes and systems. So these companies that are doing well, these businesses that are doing well, they have systems into play where when you come to their website and you put in that email address, certain things happen. When you get done speaking and you get off stage and I say, hey, text this number to this, there's certain things that happen behind the scenes. Or when someone comes to my website and they say, Darryl, we want you to speak, there should be a system that every client goes through. That's why you like Chick-fil-A so much, because when you go to Chick-fil-A, you know what your sandwich is going to taste like. You know what's going to happen. You know they're going to say my pleasure afterwards. And you get used to those things. So if I'm trying to build a multi-million-dollar organization, which I am, I have to start putting those systems into place, because at the end of the day, in 2 or 3 years, it's not just going to be Darryl Bellamy who can take a call, right, and do stuff last minute. It's going to be a system that people have to go through. So that's my big goal. Second thing is I might go back and get the PhD to become that expert in the education field for students, to give me that credibility. And that third thing would be, so we got systems, we got the PhD, and I think I'll probably do like a student conference next year, man. So I'm all about, I say this a lot, like transformation. So that's why I don't like the whole motivational speaker thing sometimes, because I look at it like you motivate and then you go and then people forget what you did and people aren't really changed. So I want to do some transformational work where I work with students or just people in general for more like a day and a half, kind of like you're doing at your summit, where I can work with students and they actually leave change and actually leave wanting to make an impact on their community and changing their lives.
Well, there you have it, man. There you have it. I guess our last thing is before we go, I'll probably ask you this offline anyways. I think I'll ask you, but just for the audience clarification, why do you want to get a PhD? And I mean, I know not why, but what do you think that's going to look like as far as with your speaking career and et cetera? Have you thought about that?
So for me, a lot of it is, first thing that comes to mind is credibility, right? So we have a lot of speakers who speak on leadership and speak on those topics, but there's no hard research behind what they're saying, right? It's just them pretty much just talking. So stories and stuff like that. So when I think about long term, and I look at the higher ed industry, which is the whole college university industry, budgets are only going down, right? So certain schools just don't have the budget for speakers anymore, but people always pay and people always want to hear from experts. Experts will never go out of style. So if I can get that PhD possibly, or if I do it, I will get it. But if I can get that PhD, have that PhD behind my name, have actual research. So right now I'm collecting the fears. I put them in spreadsheets. I have that data. But if I can get actual empirical research behind it, then that's going to set me up, especially if I go to an Ivy League school. That's definitely going to set me up for more success in the future.
Say no more, man. So, well, last thing, where can people find you at, man? Reach you at online, all that good stuff, and et cetera. So
best place is probably Instagram. So at Bellamy, Bellamy Inspires, and my site, BellamyInspires.com. If you want to shoot me an email, if you have any questions, I would love to be able to possibly assist in any way that I can. So Darryl at BellamyInspires.com. So it's pretty consistent. Bellamy Inspires on everything, and Darryl at BellamyInspires.com. Let me know if anything that I said connected with you, and let's go from there and see how we can continue making this world better, bro.
Say less. And remember, audience, this Saturday, I'm doing a free 45-minute Q&A, talk about the conference, talk about speaking, all the stuff that we didn't talk about today with D, man. This Saturday at 10 a.m., 10 to 10:45. You can find more information at GregEHill.com/MT series, and you'll see it on my LinkedIn, on my Instagram, and all that good stuff, man. So, Minority Trailblazer Nation, this has been a different segment, different interview, but we still doing this one thing. And what is that one thing? Oh, we subscribing, downloading, and reviewing the podcast, and 2, changing the freaking culture. Good night.